the meeting is recorded. So if you don't want to be recorded, then leave the meeting and you can always watch the recording a little bit later on. So I've muted all your microphones. That's all good. I had to mute a few as they came in. So look, in terms of dropout, if I drop out, go to the discussion forum and look for instructions there. If you drop out, just try and get back in. If that fails, turn your computer off, turn it on again. There is a chat pod. Let's put that up. And so if you want to ask any questions, you just put them in the chat pod, or otherwise just raise your hand or unmute your microphone, and you can ask a question. So the agenda tonight is that I'm just going to give a little bit of feedback on assignment number 2. I'm just going to talk about preparing for assignment 4. And I'm also just going to discuss some basics of referencing, because the next assignments now are requiring referencing to be done. I'm just going to close the curtains behind me. And then I'm just going to talk about Turnitin a little bit, because I have had a few questions asking about Turnitin. So I'll talk about that briefly. So let me share my screen. All right, just give me a thumbs up if you can see assessment item 2 feedback presentation. Yeah, okay, thanks, Rachel. All right, so I think the most important thing is that the first thing to do when you're preparing for an essay assignment is to study the document, which is called presentation essay. Now I've put that into the assessment item 2 folder, 5, might have even been put the 4, the 5 and the 6. And it's really important to have a good look at that. And I'll just go there very quickly. It talks about the structure. It talks about the language. Don't worry about visuals at this stage. It talks about cover page, and it's quite amazing. At least a third of the class didn't bother with a cover page. Contents page we don't really need. Introduction is the TABCOT acronym that I talked about. I'll go over this again shortly. And then to structure your paragraphs using the PEA or PEAL format. And then a discussion and conclusion. There's some components. So very important that you have a good look at that. So from now on, we are going to be doing referencing. And I'm going to start off nice and slow. We'll do the very basics today, just give an overview of referencing. And then in subsequent online meetings, we'll look at specific types of reference. We'll practice referencing together. And so that we get it down to a fine art. So the most important thing is, before you write any essay assignment, go back to the presentation essay document. And this is it here. And have a look at what's in there. All right. So, so all future essay assignments, with the exception of the annotated bibliography, will have an introduction, a body, a discussion, and conclusion. Now, assessment items 5 and 6 are actually quite big assignments compared to the little one-pager that we've just done. And so the introduction and discussion and conclusion are about 10 or 15%, and the body will be about 70–80%. Unlike for the first assignment where, because we were learning how to do an introduction and we were learning how to do discussion conclusion, they were actually much bigger. And we basically ended up with basically 4 paragraphs: an introduction, a paragraph supporting the theme, a counter argument for the next paragraph, and then a discussion and conclusion. So it was about 25, 50, 25. But in the long essays now, it's it's about 10, 80, 20, 10, 80, 10. All right. So what goes into an introduction? Obviously, I've talked about tab cod, and I've talked about going to the presentation essay document. So it's pretty important to revisit those documents and have a look. So the other thing also is that you will have got some feedback from me in the assignment that's been sent back to you. I haven't finished marking them, so only some of you have received assignments, but you will receive feedback which will point to you, say, okay, you've done this well, you've done that well. What's missing here is an objective, or what's missing here is a little bit more background. So go back to the presentation essay document, go to the feedback, and I'll talk about feedback shortly. Then, so assessment 5 and 6 that are coming up are quite long assignments, and you'll have quite a few paragraphs. And so now we need to step up a notch, and we now use the Peel format for putting together paragraphs. And what I'll do is I'll just read very quickly, if I can, a good example of a student who wrote this paragraph, where it is clear that city people have an unfavorable view of farmers. So that's the point that the student made. Then the evidence or the examples is the media often portrays farmers as old, haggard, down and out men in their late 50s. Often the popular media make jokes of this image of the farmer who is not taken seriously enough. So that's the evidence and examples. And then the analysis, which is the final parts of the paragraph. This is a good example. To improve social capital in rural farming regions, the National Farmers Federation could begin an advertising campaign which portrays farmers in a better light as educated, technologically advanced members of both genders, which in turn will attract younger people into agriculture and improve the farming community's social capital. So they made the point is that farmers have a pretty poor image. They've given the evidence of where that poor image comes from. And then in the analysis, they've actually suggested what can be done about that. So that was a very good, very succinct and very simple paragraph to write using the PEA format. So the next part of the essay is the discussion and conclusion. And I've said this a couple of times: summarize the main points, address the objectives that were set out in the introduction, evaluate your findings. Now this is where your own opinions come, and then make some conclusions. What is the next step? And again, I'll just read quickly another student, similar assignment. It's clear that city folk have one perception of the Australian farmer, which seems biased, while the farming community has a more positive vision of farmers, as determined by the research on perceptions. Both media and farmers' organisations need to play a role to encourage the positive perceptions, to educate city folk about where and how their food is produced. That way, city folk will better understand where and how their food is produced, but more importantly, by whom, not just old, uneducated, hardworking men. This may result in improved social capital in farming regions. So I've got a serious problem in my throat, sorry. Where younger people will be encouraged to take up agricultural careers and businesses established to serve those regions, thereby creating better social capital. So that's a very good discussion and conclusion for this little essay that we've just done. So there are some exemplars which will go up in the online meeting table a little bit later on. So basically, that feedback really applies to the next two big essays that are coming up: the position paper and the reference response to a topic question. Of course, the annotated bibliography is a little bit different. It's not quite an essay, but certainly some of the points that I've made would apply. So for this last assignment, you didn't have to do referencing. Some of you did. I gave you feedback on your referencing. You didn't lose marks or gain marks if you did or didn't do referencing. There has been a couple of, can I just ask everyone to mute? Let me just double check. Okay, there we go. I think I've muted everyone. All good, okay. So there has been a sort of a little bit of confusion about feedback, where do I get feedback, etc. So where do you get feedback? You go back into Easts, you download your marked assignment, and inside the assignment you'll find a marking rubric. It'll be color-coded with the grades. It'll have some marks, it'll have some general comments throughout. And I think I've actually here it is, yeah. So this is kind of what it would look like. So this is an assignment, this is an actual assignment. I've used a fictitious name here. So I've made a suggestion, look, it's okay, but it really could be a little bit better. And I've suggested where you can go and find out more about doing a decent cover. So here, for example, there's quite a bit of feedback about the grammar, the sentence structure, about the structure of the introduction. And then there's, in this one here, there's some comments about paragraph structure, and then just a little bit more correction of grammar, etc. So it wasn't a bad assignment. I think in this particular student's case, there were some sentences that were not complete, and you can see I've changed the punctuation to fix those sentences so that they are complete and so that it flows a little bit better. So this is a type of feedback that you will receive in the assignment when you get back. So please go back to Easts, download the marked assignment, have a look at the rubric. There will be some general comments as well as some comments throughout. And so if I just take this down a little bit, so you'll see the rubric, it'll be color-coded. I will put in a mark of what I thought it was worth, and that, as if it coincides with the comments in the grade column, I don't make any more comments, but sometimes I will highlight elsewhere in the rubric. And then at the end there is a final mark, and you can see here there are some general comments and the final mark for the assignment. So really very important, go back to Easts, download the marked assignment, and respond to that feedback for your next assignment. So any questions at this stage? Right, so Matthew said, I had sentence fragments, but on revision, couldn't identify these. So Matthew, where you're struggling with sentence structure and stuff, this is where I really would encourage you. You would put your assignment through Studiosity, or you would go to the academic skills advisors and give them your assignment, because while they can't tell you much about what a typical farmer, well, they probably could, what a typical farmer is like and why, etc., they can certainly help with your grammar, your sentence structure, etc. So I see that Rachel has said that Studiosity was super helpful. So thanks for that feedback, Rachel. So Rachel, I don't quite understand your question. What percentage is in each sector? In which sector? So if I just go back here, so if we have a look here, so there's 25% for vocabulary, 25% for grammar, 25% for ideas and supporting evidence, and 25% for sentence instruction. You can see 75% of the assignment was all about writing an essay, not about what you said in the essay.
Sorry, Peter, I just meant the actual overall score. What percentage lies in, like, say, your high distinction, etc.?
Oh, okay, so that's not showing here. So 85 and above is a high distinction, and then 75 to 84 is a distinction, and then 65 to 74 is a credit, and a pass is 50 to 65.
Beautiful, thank you.
Okay, so that's actually a good point. I think in the new rubric, I've actually got the percentages for each of those in the rubric. If I haven't, I'll fix that. So Lee has asked, how far off are the assignments that have not been marked yet? Okay, so in terms of assignment return, we are basically given 15 working days. So that's basically 3 weeks to return assignments. And you know, when you have, you know, at the moment, I've got a couple of hundred students. It certainly uses up those full 3 weeks. So I'm about, I would say I'm about a quarter of the way. I'm very lucky that I've actually got a co-marker who's marking some of the assignments. But at the end of the day, the way that I work is whoever handed in their assignment first gets it marked first. Late assignments will be marked after that 3 week period is up. So if you're late to submit, it'll be late for you to get it back. But at the end of the day, if it was handed in on time, it should be back to you within that 3 week period. And I'm basically, as I said, I basically go on first come, first served, or you have a different expression for that in Australia. So that's basically how it works. So that was just a little bit of feedback about the position paper. And so the next thing I just want to do is I want to share this screen. Just give me a thumbs up if you can see the homepage. I can't see all of you. Yeah, okay, thanks. There we go. All right, so the next thing I just want to talk about now is assessment item 4, because that's the next assignment coming up. And so just a reminder is basically you need to go to the subject outline. You need to read all the instructions. In last year's online meeting, someone said, well, how much is it worth and when is it due? Well, it just indicated we're at assignment 4, and that student still didn't know that they needed to go to the subject outline to find out that information. So first place to start is the subject outline. Now, what we've got is we've actually got 5 disciplines, agricultural disciplines, and you can choose whichever one you want to. So if you're doing a VIT course and you see the livestock one looks much better or more interesting assignment to do, then by all means do the livestock one. You don't have to do viticulture if you're a bachelor viticulture student. You don't have to do horticulture if you're a horticulture student. So you can choose your discipline. You have choices. So the first thing you've got to decide is which discipline you want to work in. We give you 4 sources, and you then do the you go to the assessment tab for the assignment, and you get a little bit more information. So you've got to do what's called an annotated bibliography, and I'm going to demonstrate that to you now. with those 4 supplied sources. It consists of 4 main parts, and you've got to do your referencing in the APA format. And then in addition to that, you have to go to the library. Now, remember, assignment 3 was learning all about how to use the library and how to find peer-reviewed journal articles. So you have to go to the library and find 2 peer-reviewed journal articles that match the discipline and the theme that, that you have chosen to do. But you don't have to do an annotated bibliography on those 2 extra sources. So you only have to do 4 annotated bibliographies. So anyway, you can read about the rationale, and there's a rubric. And just a reminder, all assignments must be submitted in Word. And the next thing to do is to go to the assessment tab for the assignment. So let's go there. So we go to assessment item 4. I'm just going to move this out the way. And so what we've done here is we've put a little bit of the basic information that's already in the subject outline. So how much is it worth? When is it due? How long should it be? What have you got to do? And that's basically what I just showed you. There's the marking rubric. And then just these are the important instructions. So basically what I'm saying to you right now is actually written there. And what I normally do before an assignment is due, I basically take that and send it to you as an email to remind you what to do to get ready for the assignment. All right, so that's just telling you what to do. So this is the annotated bibliography. So the first thing that you've got to do is you've got to do a full reference, and that is the syntax for the reference: author, full stop, year, full stop, title, full stop, source, full stop. And I'll talk about that in a little bit of detail now, and we'll do it in a lot more detail in subsequent online meetings. All right. Then below the reference, you then need to do the annotated bibliography. Now, it's basically made up of 3 parts. You start off with a topic sentence. So you tell us what the article is about. Okay. So for example, the article discusses the pros and cons of terroir in the Barossa Valley. And then what you need to do is you need to do a summary of the content. And what's really important here is there are a couple of things. You've got to put it in your own words. You don't want to be nailed for plagiarism. So that's the first thing. You've got to put the information in your own words. The second thing that's really important is not to make overview general statements. Okay, so and I'll give you a good example of one of the assignments in previous years was the pollution caused by the blueberry industry in the Northern Rivers region. And many students just gave overview statements of the rainfall washes the fertilizers into the river systems and it's causing pollution. Well, that's not good enough. That's just an overview general statement. What you need to say is what fertilizers are being washed in. Where are they being washed into? They've been washed into the rivers. Are they being washed into the estuaries? Are they being washed into the sea? What fertilizers, what components of the fertilizers are causing the pollution? Is it nitrogen? Is it phosphate? Is it both? Etc., etc. What damage is it causing to the environment? Okay, so it might be causing algal blooming. It might be threatening, the lesser spotted tree frog in the bigger spotted eucalyptus tree. So that's what we are asking you to do, is don't make broad overview general statements about what the article or about what the reference is all about. You need to pick out some very important aspects. So like we go back to the pollution of the waterways one, farmers are using, according to recommendations, farmers are overusing fertilizer. By how much? On average, 28% are over applying fertilizer. That's getting washed into the system. It's affecting the lesser spotted tree frog, etc., etc. And it's also influencing certain polyps on the Great Barrier Reef, for example. So don't make broad statements. It's causing pollution, whatever. What are the specifics? So those are the critical things to do when you're doing a summary. And then the last part is that you make an evaluation of the source. And I'll explain that in a little bit more detail when I go further down the page here. So you've got to determine how useful it was, what are its limitations, make an evaluative comment, and then say whether or not you would use it in an essay on the theme and why or why not. Right. So, and then so in terms of the length, so the summary is going to be the biggest part. That's going to be about 60 or 70% of the assignment. So that's the big part of it. The evaluation is, although the instructions are much longer, the evaluation will actually be a little bit smaller. And then there's a little note about word counts. So each of them are going to be 250 to 350 words. Total wordage is 1,200, and that excludes the additional references and the reference citations. So just the text that you write is what counts towards the word count. Right. So what we've done here is that we found some pretty useful videos online, put them up. In this video, you can see here it refers to a matrix, and a student last year said, well, can you give us a copy of the matrix? I had to pause and copy and pause and copy and pause and copy. And so I've created that matrix there for you if you're interested. This video here is one I made, which is basically me explaining exactly what I'm explaining to you now. It was made last year, so things do look slightly different, but the overall principles apply. Right, so now we're getting to the nuts and bolts. So these are the instructions. And there are some exemplars of previous years. So have a look at those. Now, you'll see there's viticulture, wine, crops, livestock, horticulture. They're all different themes from previous years, and they're all different references. So there's no chance of copy and pasting or plagiarizing. But what you will get here is that you will get a good idea of how to reference well, how to summarize well, how to make a topic statement, and how to evaluate. They're not all perfect, but certainly they're all, I think these are all HD grades. So they'll give you a good idea. And what you'll pick up from one and miss in another, you'll pick up from another and miss from one. So then we get to the themes and the sources. So as I said earlier, you've got to choose which discipline you want to do it in. So you can choose pastures, or you can choose livestock, or you can choose viticulture, or you can choose wine. We used to put wine and viticulture together, but feedback from students was, look, in our industry, they're two different disciplines. Can we have separate themes and references? So no problem. And then there's a horticulture one. So, so the theme here is, in Australia, is the American serpentine leaf miner a serious threat? Right. And what you've got to do is you've got to click on these links and open the reference and read the reference and or download it, read it, and make your summary notes. And the most important thing is, before you start writing, is to try and do the reference at the top, so you know where your summary came from. So in your note making, make sure that you put the reference there first. And so you'll go through those and you will do the annotated bibliography, pretty much like we said here. So you'll do a full bibliographic reference citation. You'll write a topic sentence. You'll do a summary, and you do an evaluation. Right. And if you want to look at what they look like, you can look at these exemplars. So what I have done here is somewhere. Oh, here they are. All right. So these are just some examples from UNE, right? So annotated bibliography. And this is just explaining more or less what I just explained to you. And here is an example. Let me just make it a little bit bigger so that we can see it. And you can see this is what an annotated bibliography looks like. We've got the citation at the top, and that is in APA format. We've got a topic sentence, when we've got a summary, and then we've got an evaluation. Now this one's very short. It's only 178 words. Yours needs to be minimum of 250. Or up to 350. And here's, this is another one. UNE, no, sorry, that was the one I've just shown you. University of New South Wales. Christ, this would happen. I'll have to go and find that link again. So, but at the end of there, it's just showing you exactly the same thing that I've just showed you from UNE. You've got the reference at the top, you've got a topic sentence, you've got the summary, and then you've got evaluation underneath. And those exemplars that I showed you, that are indicated there, if you have a look at those, they actually provide some pretty good examples. All right, so let's just go down further. Now, the other thing that you have to do is you have to cite everything in APA referencing format. And if you click on that, it'll take you to the referencing summary. This here is that you should have done this in your library tutorial on how to find peer-reviewed journal articles. But what I've done is I've put it here with some basic instructions of what to do and where to go to. And that's how you go and look for peer-reviewed journal articles in the library. So the university has put together a few library tutorials on how to evaluate. So these are very good, how to evaluate information and how to look for peer-reviewed information. So those are some pretty useful videos. And then here is that, how do I know if a journal is peer-reviewed? When you go to the library, normally it will say underneath or above it, it's peer-reviewed. If it doesn't, you can always go to Ulrich's web, type in the name of the journal, and it will tell you whether or not it's peer-reviewed. All right, so any questions, guys? All right, so Matthew, how does this differ from a literature review? That's a good question. So at the end of the day, the literature review would be the whole hog. It'll be the introduction, the body, the discussion, and conclusion. Whereas the annotated bibliography is just the references and the what would make up paragraphs or the body of an essay. So that's basically the difference. The literature review is a full-on essay, whereas the annotated bibliography is the portion of the essay where you gather the information, the evidence, the examples that we talked about in formatting a paragraph. All right. So, okay, so let's move on quickly. I'm going a little slower than I expected. With the 2 additional peer review articles, are we just adding them in the references? Yes, and I'll show you what that should look. In fact, you're asking a question now. So at the end of the day, this is what a reference list should look like. Okay, so at the end of the annotated, you'll have the 4 annotated bibliographies, and then in your reference list, only the 2 additional references. And so what you'll have is you'll have references in bold, in the middle, not underlined, not in italics, only in bold, and it's in the center of the page. You'll see here that everything is double spaced. And then your references, you can see we've got a hanging indent. And I'll talk to you about how to do that shortly, I think. And so we've got the authors, we've got the date, we've got the title of the article, we've got the source, which you can see is a journal article, and we've also got the DOI URL. And so this is basically what it should look like, and those 2 additional references. And then, of course, this is what your reference list should look like for your other essay assignments, the position paper and the referenced response. All right. So they just go at the end as references. You don't have to do an annotated bibliography on them. You only do the annotated bibliography on the 4 that we give you. All right, so let's get back here. All right, so just quickly. All right, so the first thing is, why do we reference? Okay, at the end of the day, it's to ensure academic integrity, academic honesty. You've got to acknowledge where you got the information from, and that you've got to acknowledge concepts, words, images, everything that you get from someone else, you have to acknowledge, and that's why you reference. And if you don't reference, that's a breach of academic integrity, and you could be in for the high jump for doing that. All right, so what that means is that if you're dishonest, you get handed over to the academic integrity unit. And believe me, I've handed over quite a few students over the years to the academic integrity unit, and punishments have varied from do the assignment again to being excluded from the university. So it's something that the university takes very seriously. They monitor us to see that we are monitoring you. And how do we do that? We do it through Turnitin, and I'll talk about Turnitin shortly. All right. So, just basically what I said is that to not reference is to plagiarize. It's considered intellectual theft, and it has consequences, basically. So if you do reference, it shows honesty, openness, integrity. It shows our dependence on other people's work. And more importantly, it allows readers to follow up on someone else, on someone's work. So for example, if someone says, well, look, these cultivars are doing well in the Barossa Valley, and you want to actually find out more about that, what you can then do is you can go to the reference, find the original source, read more about it, maybe even find out who the author is or authors are, and maybe contact them to find out more information. So it enables you to trace information and to further investigate. And basically, the other thing also, that it separates others' work from your own opinions. So what should we reference? Okay, so facts, opinions. You can use direct quotations. I'll talk about that shortly. You must reference material that has been paraphrased by others. You still reference that. And then, of course, any graphs, pictures, tables, you need to reference those. Even if, for example, you go to the Bureau of Meteorology website and you get some rainfall figures and you go and put them into a graph, you still have to acknowledge where that data came from. So that's very critical that you do that. So what don't you have to reference? Basically, your own opinions and interpretations, or anything that is common knowledge. All right. So someone asked me, is that, what about climate change? Is that common knowledge? Well, of course, it depends on your view. All right. So I said to the person, well, if your view is that climate change is a real thing, the best way to back up your statement is to find a reference, and a reputable reference which backs your statement. And so if you're not sure if it's common knowledge or not, err on the side of caution and find a reference to say something about that. All right, so I said I would talk about direct quotations. Now, if you're in the law faculty, of course, lawyers are quoting and citing lots and lots of material, and you'll find in any law assignment, 80% of the assignment might be direct quotations, right? But that's the nature of the discipline. In agriculture, we really frown upon more than 5% of direct quotations. Right? So when you put direct quotations into your assignment, you put them in double inverted commas, and you got to make sure that it's not more than 5%. Now, what I want to tell you for the annotated bibliography, the accepted level for direct quotations is 0. Okay, you put it all into your own words. Okay, when we get to assignment 5 and assignment 6, maximum of 5%. Right, so that's what basically what we are allowing, or allowing, sorry. All right, so how do I acknowledge the work of others and avoid plagiarism? Reference every idea, every piece of information that's not your own. All right, keep accurate notes of your sources, and that's what I said earlier. So as soon as you find a source and you start summarizing it, the first thing you should do is just put a reference to it at the top of your notes so that you know where you got that from. Because what does happen often is that students will summarize stuff and they'll put it into the essay and think, oh, hell, where did I get that? I've forgotten where I got it from. And then make it up. But believe me, Turnitin and us old fogies who've been doing it for many years will find out and we know what happens, and you'll be in for the high jump if you do that. So, I'll give you a very good example. I had a student who sent an assignment with no references at all. So I sent it back to him and said, put the references in. And he went in and he put Smith, 1979, Jones, 1984, and a few other common Australian names, and sent it back to me. And of course, he's no longer at this university. All right. And that's an absolutely true, genuine story. All right. So paraphrase accurately and use Turnitin. So let's just talk about Turnitin very briefly. I mean, that's what I'm going to talk about now. Yeah. Right. So, so there is a Turnitin item in the menu that you can click on that, and it'll take you to this particular document here. Well, where has it gone? This one here, and I'll talk about that. But if you go to the site and you click on Access Turnitin, you can click there, and it will actually take you in. All right. Now, what has happened is that we've had some changes, and we used to be the School of Ag and Wine Sciences. Now we've merged with Environmental Sciences, and we've merged with Veterinary Sciences. So now we're the School of Agricultural, Environmental, and Veterinary Sciences. And so the Turnitin system has actually changed a little bit. Right. So this document, you will find a link to it in the Interact site. Look on the main menu on the left-hand side. There's a Turnitin tab. Click on that. It'll take you to this document. Right. So we are now the School of Agricultural, Environmental, and Veterinary Sciences. And if you click there, it will take you to an enrollment site. Now, I'm not going to do that now because it's going to take too long. But at the end of the day, there's a whole lot of nice screenshots in this document. Will show you exactly what to do, where to go, and what to do. And you can see it's all nicely put together by my colleague, Sam Parker. And oh, there's his name. And so it will enroll you. You click submit, you take it down, you click check my assignment, and then you click upload the submission, and then you go and browse, give it a title, give it a name, browse for the file, and then upload to review it, and then submit it to Turnitin. And what will happen is that it'll take a while to do the similarity check, and you'll end up with a report that says, whatever percent similarity it is. All right. So I'm going to talk about similarity, and I'll show you some pretty poor examples shortly. But at the end of the day, what will happen is that what you'll see is that there's the assignment on the right-hand side. You click on these buttons, it'll show you how much you've plagiarized from where, or how much is similar to various sources. You can download it, and you take it back, and you can go and work on it, and then you can resubmit it as many times as you want. So you can work on it, resubmit it, and then you should be good to go. All right. So that's basically how that plagiarism stuff works. All right, so there are some links in the presentation, and I'll put a copy of this up in the online meeting table. All right, Matthew, I noticed that Studiosity gives you 10 contacts up to October. After that, you're on your own. I've used one so far, and I wonder if you redraft and submit it again, you might use 2 or more. To answer that question, I have no idea, Matthew. I will have to find out. I'll have to find out about that Studiosity. How many submits? Okay. So, being a former student myself, look for ways around that. What I would do if I'd reached my limits, instead of going to Studiosity, I would go to the academic skills cite and submit it to the academic skills team, because they're two different entities. Right? The academic skills team is within the university. The Studiosity staff are all over the world. So that would be my first step to get around it. But anyway, Matthew, I'll find out about how many submissions you can make. Is that 10 submissions of the same assignment or 10 submissions overall? Well, we'll wait for Matthew to respond. So let me just get on quickly. All right, so this is what a report looks like to me. So at the end of the day, what I've just showed you, Turnitin, that Turnitin is the student's Turnitin. So that's where you can go and put your assignment in. Turnitin will check it, give you a report back, tell you whether or not it's a bit excessive. All right, thanks, Matthew. 10 altogether. So I'll double check that. And what I'll do is I'll put an announcement out tomorrow to answer that question. So this is what we see. So this is now Turnitin. Now you've submitted your assignment. Now we put it into Turnitin, which is now connected to the World Wide Web. Okay, and it's now locked you in as having submitted to the general public. Whereas the student one, it's submitted to an internal class where it just checks it for you and gives you some feedback. So this is the sort of thing that we might see. So you can see, obviously, in this particular assignment, it was 54% plagiarized. All right, so this is a particularly bad one. And then you can see that submitted to the university 1%. So it's the same question, it's the same subject, it's the same assignment. And so we just ignore that, okay? But this is the sort of thing we don't want to see, is where you've got, highlighting all the way through the document. So this is particularly bad. The student got into big trouble. But the other thing also, what is quite interesting here, is that you have a look here. This part here, all right, is showing that the student not only copied direct from a reference, but copied from another student and even put in the same references. So you can see how the highlight has highlighted the text as well as the references. So these are the sort of things that we look for. Students ask for what percentage is acceptable. Well, we go and look at absolutely every assignment. So someone might have a 9% similarity report, and on the surface that might be, oh, that's fine, okay. But when you go in and have a look, and then you have a look down the side here, and you can see this particular student, 6% each from numerous sources. If it's over 5% from a single source, you'll get your knuckles wrapped, certainly. If it's over 20%, you'll get a talking to. So, those are the sort of guidelines to go by. So overall, about 20%, certainly less than 5% for each and every reference. Okay. So how's my time? Okay. So I'm going to go very, very quickly now, referencing the basics. All right. So looks like 10 altogether. Used to mark papers. Where's obviously they cut and pasted? Yeah, Encyclopedia Britannica and internet. But I had a discussion with Sam Parker today. Is that there are sites where you can get your assignment cleaned. Okay, so you send them to these sites, and they find the similarity, and then they clean it for you. So what do? You just do your best. At the end of the day, who you're cheating, you're only cheating yourself. All right, so how do I cite a reference? So there's two ways to cite a reference. One is in the text, and the other one is in the reference list. And I showed you an example of a good reference list. So there's a good reference list, references at the top. The citation, not the citations, the references are listed in alphabetical order by the first author. All right. I think the first thing that I just need to point out, don't change the order to alphabetical within the reference, okay? At the end of the day, the guy at the front is the head honcho. He's the big man. He's the one who gets most of the recognition, and he wants to keep that recognition. So you leave his name at the front. All right. So don't put the author's names in alphabetical order. What you do is you list the references in alphabetical order according to the first author. All right. So let's get back to being a researcher. So the first thing is learning how to reference, and a document you're going to be using time and time again is the APA referencing summary. And basically this is it here. And so what has happened is that our staff have gone into the APA system, they've picked the bones out of it, and they've given us the basics. So if you want to know how to cite a book, you click on that. So one author, this is what you do. And it tells you how to cite it in the reference list, and it tells you how to cite it in the text. And so there are books, book chapters, series of books, and then there are periodicals, journal articles, etc., etc. So I'm not going to go through that in any detail. We'll deal with this in some detail in subsequent online meetings. So what I want to do now is just try and cover some of the basics. So that's the document. All right. So there's a general syntax that you use, right? So when you do an in-text citation, you just use author and date, right? In the list of references, you use author, year, the title, and the source. And so what I've done here is just giving you some examples. So you can put the reference at the beginning of the sentence. So Jones, then in brackets, 2009. Or you can put the references at the end of the sentence. Now, if you've got a number of references that you put in the brackets, put them in chronologically. So the oldest one first, the latest one at the end. And what is also quite important here is that the full stop of the sentence goes after the reference. And you can see, we've got it done here again. The other thing also is that where there are, more than two authors, you can use et al. And what we'll do is we'll explain it in more detail in another online meeting. Right. So this here is just showing you how you put references in the text, and it goes into brackets, and I'll show you some examples shortly. Whoops. The second thing is that when you put references into the reference list, you've got to have the author or authors, full stop, the year in brackets, full stop, the title, full stop, and the source, full stop. So this is an example. This is a veterinary journal. So we've got two authors. We've got the year it was published. We've got the title of the article, and then we've got the name and volume of the journal and the page numbers. And then we've got the DOI URL. Right, so that's just giving you an overview of what it looks like. Right, so Rachel, I'm just going to come back to your question. Is this in assessment resources? What is, Rachel?
This whole document as such, are you putting that up in assessment resources?
Yeah. Okay, so this one here? Or this one?
Both.
Yeah. Okay, so everything I show you in an online meeting will go into the online meeting tab. All right, so let me just show you quickly. Oops.
Yeah, no problem. I just thought it might have been in assessment resources as well.
Yep.
No worries.
All right, so, all right, okay, so I'll just move on then. All right, so, okay. So the general syntax for in-text citations is author and date only, okay? However, if it's a book, which is very lengthy, you should put the page number or the paragraph or the section. So anything that's very lengthy, put the page, put the section, put the paragraph number. If it's just a 2-3 page article, then don't worry about putting in the page number. All right, so here are some examples. So we've got Malcolm and Egan, 2006, page 45. And what's important here is that when you've got the names outside the brackets, it's and in full. When you've got the names inside the brackets, you use an ampersand, and I'll show you some examples shortly. Right, so so these are just some examples. Paragraph 76, page 76, and this one here is section 8. All right, so just a few more examples. So here now that the reference is inside the brackets, we use the ampersand. If it's outside the brackets, we use the full word and. Okay, but we're still using author, date, and the page if it's a long reference. Now, what you can do is that if it is a lot of information from one particular reference, what you can do is you can cite the reference, and then you can put the page numbers. You can separate the page from the author and the date. All right. So now let's look at some of the minute detail. Okay. So what we've got here is that we've got a reference now. It's at the end of the sentence. The full stop goes after the bracket, not at the end of the sentence. It's Smith and Kennedy, separated by an ampersand, and you've got spaces. You've got a comma, space, the year, comma, space, the page number, abbreviated P, full stop, space, and then the page number. All right. So just take note of where the commas, the spaces, and the figures actually go. Here's another example. All right, so now we've got Smith and Kennedy, and now it's outside. So now we use and, not the ampersand. All right, but we still got in the brackets the year, comma, the page, full stop, space, and the page number. So just take a note of where all the commas and full stops go. All right, so here's another example. In this case now we'll be separating the pages from the authors. It's outside the brackets, so we're using and then we've got the year in brackets, and then at the end of the sentence we've got the page number. The asterisk there is just explaining what I've just explained here now. All right, so this is a typical reference list, and I showed you an example earlier. So this is a book, and when you do books, you put all the authors. Okay, look where all the commas and full stops and spaces go, and make sure you use all of those. The title for books is in italics. So that's a book. The old APA system, you had to put the place of publication, but these days you only have to put the publisher. Right. So this is quite an old journal. This is an in-print journal. So you can see it's 1973, but still we've got author, we've got the year, we've got the title, whoops, and we've got the source, okay? And this would have come out of the library. Yeah, Matthew, so I'll show you where all of these documents are very shortly. Right. So anything I show you in the online meeting room, there I put all the documents into the table in the online meeting Zoom, but anything to do with academic skills is also in the academic skills tutorial. And then anything that's specific for an assignment, I'll put it in the assignment tab. So for assignment 5, you'll see all the stuff you need for assignment 5 there. All right, so let's have a look at an electronic journal now. We've got the authors, we've got the year, we've got the title, and we've got the source. And in this case, yeah, it's electronic, so we've got the DOI URL. Another example is the Bureau of Meteorology. So we've used the major seasonal rainfall zones graphic, and it's a website, so it's in italics. And what I will do in subsequent online meetings, I'll give you a table of when do I use italics and when don't I use italics. All right, just 2 quick questions. Matthew says, check out the assessment tools. 2, yeah, the list of resources there. Sorry being said, how do you reference a specific paragraph, as you said earlier? Okay, so let's just go back there very quickly. So here, so for example, what we've got is Jones et al. 2020, paragraph 76. Now, as I said, you put the page number or the paragraph number or the section number if it's a massive document. If it's a small journal article, then don't worry about putting the page number or the paragraph number, okay? Because generally you'll find the information quite quickly and quite easily. All right. Yeah, academic skills tools. Right, so, okay. last but not least, I think. All right. So referencing, get it right. Okay. Start on a new page. Put the title references in bold. It's got to be centered in bold, not italics, not underlined. Okay. Put the references in alphabetical order, and that's of the first author's names. Remember, the head honcho is the guy or the girl who gets their name first, right? They're the most important people. They're the ones who get cited first. So don't rearrange the authors in alphabetical order within the reference, right? Don't use bullet points or numbering. Use double spacing. Use a hanging indent and highlight the reference list. So how do you do a hanging indent? So it's quite simple. I wonder if I've got a document. There we go. All right. So hanging indent, you just highlight the whole text and you just press Control-T, and you can see now it's a hanging indent. So quite simple and quite easy to do. All right. So then use the APA referencing summary, which is this document that we've talked about. And if you can't find what you're looking for in the APA referencing summary, if it's something quite odd, if you go to the APA style blog and then just search, okay, how do I cite this type of reference? Something will come up. It's actually quite good. I've used it numerous times and it's actually pretty good. All right. So the exemplar of the references list I've showed you already, but I just want to point out, you've got to have a title, the references, it's in bold and it's centered. You've got to have a hanging tab. You've got to be double spaced, alphabetical order, no bullet points, not pints. Okay, it's time for a pint. No numbering, and make sure you use the APA referencing summary, 7th edition, not the 6th. All right. And so this is a good references list. Okay, so you can see we've got our hanging indent. It's listed alphabetically. And you can see there are hyperlinks to the URLs. And you can see that everything's done pretty well. And what we will do in the next couple of online meetings is we'll learn each of these referencing styles, how to reference a book, how to do a journal article, how to do a YouTube video, how to do a newspaper, how to do all these other examples of references, and we'll work through them together bit by bit, and hopefully at the end of those couple of online meetings, you'll be good to go with your referencing. All right, so that we've done. All right, so I'll give you more detail in subsequent online meetings. We'll talk about referencing. So I think what I just want to do is just to re-emphasize, where do we find the information on our Interact site? So the first place to look for anything to do with academic skills is to go to the academic skills tutorial. And what you will find is that Karen has recorded some skills tutorials for us, and anything she shares with us, she puts links to the documents underneath. All right. And so that's the library one, which you've all done by now. Here's another one. There's the APA referencing summary. So there's a link to it there. So I'm just going to pick on APA referencing summary. So there's a link to it in the academic skills tutorial. Okay, where else might I find it? Okay, so in the online meeting Zoom table. So there's a table down here. Is this on or off? Let me just put it on, and I'll show you what last semester's table looked like. So, for example, in week 4. So in week 4, we talked about feedback, and there's a link to it. So whatever I show you in the online meeting, I'll put links to it there. So there's another example of where the APA referencing summary is. Now it's linked to assignments, isn't it? So although we didn't have to do referencing for assignment 2, some students asked can they reference? So I put a link to it there, for example. Okay. In assessment item 4, you have to do referencing. And I hope I'm not proved wrong here. Somewhere in here is a link to APA referencing summary. All right. If I go back to assessment item 6, what I've done here is I've actually told you to go back to what's in assessment item 5 folder, and these are additional things. So in assessment item 5 folder, hope not to be proved wrong, I should have a link to it. APA referencing summary is there. Okay, so there's lots of places you can look for it. Look for those links. Look on the subject outline, look in the academic skills tutorial, look in the individual folders for the assessment items. And another place that you can actually find them is we've created this repository, which we have called, where is it? Writing in Science. There it is. All right. And if you go into Writing in Science and you want to look at referencing, you'll find there's a whole lot of stuff about referencing there, and there are links to that particular document somewhere in here. You work through it and you'll find it. All right. So I think that's covered everything. Does the academic integrity module have to be done before Friday? Oh, I don't know. I tell you what I do know is that if you haven't done the academic integrity module, you won't get your results at the end of the semester. Okay? So I think what that says to me is that you have to have done it by the end of the semester. It's in your own interest to do it now. So I think that's my best answer, Matthew, is do it as soon as you can, because it certainly will help you in doing these assignments as we go through. All right, but I do know that they just won't give you your results if you haven't done it. Also, if you haven't paid. Those are the two things I do know about results. So you'll get your individual assignment results, but you won't get your subject result at the end of the semester if you haven't done that. If you haven't done that academic integrity module. All right, let's just put this back here. Make sure I haven't missed any questions. I think I've covered all the questions. All right, 8 minutes over. Apologies for that. Should have finished at 8. Are there any final questions? Let me just stop sharing. Any final questions? No one's raised their hand. All right, guys, I think let's leave it there. I'll stop the recording. I'll stick around for a few minutes afterwards if anyone does have any final questions.